Welcome to Podkey Slopcast, where this week's AI story is power shifting under everyone's feet. One export directive knocked out major models. An open-weight Chinese release sparked genuine frontier anxiety, and suddenly the safest assumption in AI looked a lot less safe. The interesting part isn't just who won the week, it's what these shocks reveal about dependency, leverage, and how brittle a lot of AI strategy still is. The confirmed fact here is straightforward. A US export control directive forced Anthropic to suspend access to its Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models, and by June 19, there still wasn't a resolution. For developers, that means the risk wasn't theoretical. Endpoints went away. Products built on top of them were exposed, and roadmaps suddenly depended on a regulatory process they don't control. That matters because a lot of AI planning still quietly assumes model availability is a stable input, like cloud storage or payment processing. This incident says it isn't. There's an easy narrative that this is mainly an Anthropic problem. The stronger reading is that it's a systems problem for anyone over-concentrated on one provider, one jurisdiction, or one model family. The G7 angle sharpens that. European leaders were reportedly caught between pushing for access to Mythos right now and building a sovereign AI posture for the longer term. That trade-off is real. Near-term access gets you capability today. Sovereign strategy buys autonomy later, but usually with weaker models, higher costs, and slower execution in the short run. The missing context in a lot of hot takes is that dependence is often rational until it suddenly isn't. If a frontier model is dramatically better, governments and firms will use it. The problem is what happens when policy, not product quality, becomes the binding constraint. Then you have ZAI's GLM 5.2, an open-weight model reportedly posting benchmark scores comparable to Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5, with Jeremy Howard calling it a marvel and saying it passes the vibe check. Benchmarks alone never settle the question, and vibe reports are still anecdotal, but the consistency of the community reaction matters. People like Riley Brown and Matt Pocock are highlighting speed, nuanced outputs, and long context performance, and that's enough to create real pressure. The pressure comes from two directions. First, if the model is genuinely this capable, frontier quality is getting harder to keep scarce. Second, because it's open-weight, access doesn't depend on one API gatekeeper or one company's policy choices. That doesn't automatically mean open-weight wins. Operating these systems still requires infrastructure, tuning, and organizational competence. But it does widen the field of who can compete and how fast they can iterate. This is where the geopolitical piece matters. A strong, non-Western open-weight release changes bargaining power. It gives enterprises and governments alternatives, and it gives Western labs a harder story to tell if their advantage is mostly being first rather than remaining clearly better. The FOMO is probably real, but FOMO isn't evidence. The better-supported claim is narrower. GLM 5.2 appears strong enough to increase competitive urgency and weaken the assumption that frontier capability can stay concentrated in a small club. OpenRouter's Fusion API lands right in that gap. The concept is to fan each prompt out to a panel of models, have a judge model pick the best answer, and package the result as Fable-level intelligence at half the price. That headline claim should be treated as a vendor claim until independently validated across workloads, because quality depends on the task mix, the judge model, latency tolerance, and how often ensemble disagreement actually helps. Still, the architecture itself is credible and important. If one model disappears, gets rate limited, or becomes politically inaccessible, a multi-model layer gives you continuity instead of a cliff. There's also a second-order shift here. Once products are designed around routing and orchestration, instead of model loyalty, model providers compete more on narrow strengths like coding, context length, price, or reliability, and less on being the single platform you must trust. That can improve token efficiency and cost performance, but it also changes where value accrues. Some of the leverage moves away from the labs and toward whoever owns the routing layer, evaluation logic, and customer workflow. The SpaceX Cursor acquisition adds another axis to the story. After its IPO, SpaceX completed the purchase of Cursor, and the notable claim is that Cursor already has a full-scale model rather than being just a post-trained Chinese replica. If that claim holds, this isn't just acqui-hire theatre, it suggests SpaceX is serious about becoming a real AI actor with technical assets, not merely branding itself into the conversation. The strategic question is where Elon Musk points that effort. One path is frontier efficiency, where SpaceX leans into engineering discipline and tries to deliver very strong performance per dollar or per watt. Another is brute force pursuit of state-of-the-art, which is much more capital-intensive and puts them into a harsher race with entrenched labs. Those choices matter because they shape market structure. An efficiency play could intensify price pressure and deployment speed. A pure SOTA chase could raise the spending bar and reinforce the idea that only giant platforms can contend. Right now, the evidence supports seriousness of intent more than certainty about direction. The acquisition is a signal. The durable impact depends on whether SpaceX builds a distinctive AI stack or just adds one more well-funded contender. Put together, the Anthropic shutdown and the SpaceX move are why some analysts called this a realignment week. Mike Bungano's line that the AI table feels flipped for the first time in 3 years captures the mood, even if it's still more directional than proven. Confidence in established labs got shaken, but not because they suddenly became weak. It got shaken because their dominance looked more contingent than many customers wanted to admit. That opens space for what some are framing as a rebel alliance of enterprises looking for powerful intelligence with tighter incentive alignment. The phrase is colourful, but the underlying logic is plain. Customers want capability without total dependence. That's why diversified sourcing, sovereign and on-prem options, and alternative architectures are getting accelerated interest. These are no longer niche preferences for paranoid buyers, they're becoming normal risk management. The caution is that fragmentation has trade-offs too. More suppliers can mean more resilience, but also more integration complexity, weaker standardization, and murkier accountability when something breaks. A quieter but useful thread in all of this is Matthew Berman's Loop Library, a set of copyable interaction loops for engineering and non-technical work shared on Twitter. This matters because most AI adoption doesn't happen at the level of grand strategy. It happens when busy people find repeatable prompts and workflows that actually save time. Structured loops are a practical bridge between raw model capability and everyday use. They lower the activation energy, especially for people who don't want to become prompt hobbyists just to get value. And there's a nice symmetry here at the top of the market. Firms are diversifying models. At the user level, people are modularizing workflows. Both are responses to the same reality. Flexibility is starting to matter as much as raw model prestige. The headline this week isn't that one lab fell or one newcomer won. It's that AI is starting to look less like a settled hierarchy and more like a moving market with real political and architectural fault lines. That's it for Podkey Slopcast. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.